So
Yes, we can see it.
all right. So I'm just going to start off with just a very short little bit about myself. I'm a photographer. I've been a photographer for over 30 years. And I decided to get my MFA because I am currently adjunct teaching in MTSU and have been for a while. And I've been college professor for quite a while, since 2007. And I felt like it was just time, but I've got a family and there wasn't really any programs available. So when this came along, I jumped on the opportunity to do it. And I can't tell you how much I've learned about being an artist from this. So we're going to go ahead and read my statement about my work. And what this is basically just the culmination of what I did in the 2.5 years or so in the program. So let me see. Oops, go back. Sorry guys, technical difficulties here. Oh my gosh, I can't move that. Let me see if I can find it on my other computer, because I can't even see this. Okay, so this work began with the explanation of identity, considering a commentary about gender, shame, humanity, and artist anxieties, as I question the relevance of the straight white male role in contemporary art. The intention of my work is to visually represent human uniqueness and individuality. This work considers ideas of body and identity, faith and belief, challenging shame and sexuality within the concepts of gender, confronting my own thoughts about love, marriage, and equality. Man and woman together, made more dynamic when united, but allowing distinctions to be semi-transparent with the use of multi-exposure. As a photographer, I turn the camera on myself, not as a self-portrait, but as a vehicle to put myself in the position of the object, to counter the power imbalance inherent in the works made by members of the straight white male patriarchy. Manipulation of film prior to exposure creates unknown extractions and redactions using an inherent unfaithfulness of expired analog film to explore the possibility of some larger collective truth. This could represent God, the unknown universe that drives human curiosity. Marks are made on an expired film using acrylic paint, whiteout, and semen. Once exposed, developed, and washed away, remnants are left hovering above the image as a sublime presence. This work continues to evolve into a commentary on dualities and turning points as I investigate the edge of things, the space that lives between conscious and subconscious, a place of contemplation or change. And I'll get into that a little more. So I want to start with the process. The first thing that I kind of was told as I was ending my first semester residency was to let go of the techniques that I had used for 30 years as a photographer. I was encouraged to try a more alloteric approach, meaning just kind of be more random in what I did. And so one of the first things I did as I was exiting our first summer residency was to use a double exposure, but with 2 different cameras. So I shot a roll of 120 film of a nice yet abandoned house, kind of in a very traditional way with a 645 camera. So it lined up to be a nice horizontal image. Then I went to the darkroom and I re-rolled the film. And I put that film into a old Holga 6x6 camera and photographed a man and a woman in a studio. And it was a series of shots that were very linear, and where the man started on his back and the woman comes and enters and is eventually they were together, and then eventually she is gone, leaving him alone again. And with this, I was exploring ideas of sexual addiction, and loss. And this is some of those images right here. So as the fall of that first year was going, I kept, this was during the time of the Judge Kavanaugh hearings. And being a white Christian male during this time, it was kind of unsettling. I had, for almost all of my photographic career, shot fashion and nudes. And I felt like I needed to put myself in the position of the model. So I asked a younger female photographer friend named Jenna Winstead to help me do some, I guess, sort of self-portraits where she would direct me. And I placed myself in the uncomfortable situation, went out on a really cold day. I was in view of an interstate in a field, and I was now the nude model. The other part of this is I wanted to redact myself. The intent was to kind of be empathetic to the political situation that was becoming the Me Too movement. What I did this time, kind of going back for those, I went to the darkroom, unrolled the film prior to even shooting anything, and just took in the dark and painted and used whiteout and painted smudges on the film, not knowing exactly where they would be. Rolled the film back up, gave the camera to Jenna, and went out into the field, and she took pictures of me. The other thing that I was doing was I was using really old expired film that we had found. And it was just kind of my nod to history, of just kind of nod to the history of being a white male. From that led me into seeing how that was interesting. And the next time I went out and went ahead, had Jenna shoot me again, but this time I painted more geometric shapes on the film. Again, not knowing what was going to happen. So now I tried the whiteout and I was amazed at how many of the photos lined up so wonderfully. Here being one of them, where I had no idea that this triangle would ever appear right where I was in the middle of this frame. And it started to give me a faith that when I was painting, what I would get with an image that worked. This is a little bit of part of my paper that I wrote, and I was explaining this journey using the metaphor of the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. And I said, as a photographer, light is the material used to create with. This is also a tale of enlightenment as my journey to becoming an artist. I never really considered myself an artist, just a photographer. And this is talking about the part in the Labyrinth where you've reached your Minotaur. Illumination is the stage when you reach the center and contemplate that journey you have made and the journey yet to come as you work your way back out. So before we get into looking at a lot of the work and me kind of just being quiet, I want to really talk about how this process evolved. I've always considered myself a Christian, and my family and I had finally found a church that kind of felt like a theology class, which is what I like. In this church, we just read the Bible in church, and that's about it. During the period that we were talking about, we were doing the Book of Revelation. And the framework to my practice from then on has been inspired by the Bible. I thought about the process I'd been doing, painting on a negative in the dark, and then exposing to light, leaving a latent image. And only washed with water and developed does the image come to life. I couldn't help but think about Genesis and the creation story. I was also thinking about equality between humans and felt if I took a man and a woman and did the multi-exposure of them as part of the image, what would happen was where their bodies would be together, they would be solid, and the parts that weren't together would be a little bit transparent. And I thought this was a great way to illustrate togetherness and equality, but also show individuality. So this time I took acrylic paint and semen on the negatives. I wanted materials that said artist and creation. Paint is the art and semen is the substance of life. I had no idea what would happen, but I knew that the paint would create something like the whiteout had, and I felt that it was a good way to illustrate God or the unknown that surrounds us in the world of humankind. It reads as an abstraction. And now I'll just look at some of the work. And I kind of titled this, I went Adam and Eve, because I was taking that kind of reference and using it. I'll just let you all read this. So here's that image of the blended bodies with the crazy abstractions that kind of happened and some weird effects of blurriness and stuff that I think the semen was doing to the negative. Some of the inspiration of these pictures came from Masaccio's The Expulsion from the Garden of Eden, showing just the idea of shame in different ways. The man shaming the mind and the woman, shaming the body. If you look hard enough, you'll see the two figures coming out at the bottom. With this picture, I kind of started becoming a little bit more haphazard with the technique, allowing for light leaks and scratches in the negative, and things would become more and more abstract. I wish we could show this in the gallery. It's actually a really huge piece, about 36 inches by 74 inches. And as the second year started, we were asked to kind of look inward a little bit. No light, but rather darkness visible, served only to discover sights of woe. Regions of sorrow, doleful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes. So it's from Milton's Paradise Lost, describing hell. And as a kid, I was body shamed because of my extreme thin frame. And this is my son, by the way, at 14. I wish to live in a world of shadow where a person cannot judge you on appearance. And thought it was interesting that kind of in my own way, Milton's version of hell was my version of heaven. So I started to look at hiding places and kind of just things that lived on the edge. So Milton's version of hell sounded a lot like my version of heaven, at least the shadow world I imagined as an adolescence. I started to investigate the edge of things, the yin yang, the deep thoughts that occupy our subconscious. I use this quote from the Bible. Now the serpent was more subtle than any other beast, the field that left the Lord God had made. And now the edge of things starts to be inhabited. Now as this figure kind of enters into our world and the innocence. It could appear as figures or light leaks. So I know I rushed through those, or it felt like forever, but I have all these pictures and some more on my website, which I can put up later. But that is my presentation with my images.